I mean, Spark Therapeutics is one of the leading firms in gene therapy. It's kind of pushing the frontier of the modality. And, we actually have a sort of an internal slogan, if you will, or elevator pitch, if you want, which is Spark is all about realizing the full potential of gene therapy for patients. I mean, that is our kind of, working project name, if you want to call it the company, essentially. And that means that we are basically exploring what the full potential is in terms of which tissue types it can work for, which disease areas within those tissue types, because some things like liver and so on could go many places. All the kind of types of diseases you can treat, from sort of more singular monogenic diseases moving towards more complex. So it's really like all the things you can do with this modality, as I said, to provide benefits to patients, essentially. I mean, that is what we're about. That's true. Yes, it did. For Luxturna is the first product that came on the market for gene therapy. And then when I talked about us being sort of, being on the frontier and pushing the frontier, there was not only, of course, the research and the clinical and the manufacturing frontier there, but it was also the commercial engagement with payers, providers, and sort of putting that in place. And as you know, gene therapy is a very different type of modality, and the healthcare system is not really configured. It's used to more sort of a consumption-based model, if you will, rather than kind of an investment-based model in some ways. And so we broke down a lot of the frontiers there as well, in terms of helping people like CMS and others think about multi-year treatments, rather as opposed to in-year kind of models. Yes. So we're basically, core an AAV company, but we're also exploring non-viral ways of doing the same thing. So we're pushing the frontiers of AAV in and of itself, but also exploring, as I said, other ways. I mean, one way to think about it is that we're a company who's interested in getting into the nucleus of the cell for permanent, curative therapies. Which distinguishes us, for example, from more like, in RNAi firms or mRNA firms and so on. We are about getting into the nucleus. So AAV is the vehicle, the vector by which we use to get into the nucleus. And we're certainly piggybacking on, millions and millions of years of evolution to get there. But we are also exploring other non-viral approaches. Yeah, and in fact, many of the ways, the way I think about it is that, for the reason you cited, the CNS space in many ways has missed out on large molecule revolution of the last 20, 30 years in pharmaceuticals. All the great things that have happened with monoclonals and everything else since the 1990s have not been able to do much in the CNS space because of difficulty crossing the blood-brain barrier. So it's still a large part of a small molecule world. So if you think about gene therapy, if we can get behind the blood-brain barrier and get a gene in a cell behind the blood-brain barrier, then we're there, and it can then manufacture the pharmaceutical, if you will, in situ there at that location. So in many ways, and if you look at the gene therapy market, there's the largest disease area is in CNS. And I think for a lot of that same reason that people are seeing that this is a way to kind of bring a lot of those innovations that have happened to bear behind the blood-brain barrier. I guess one of the things about being a leader in the field compared to a lot of other players who are more one asset or two asset companies, as one of the leaders and, with Roche's support, we have the ability to have more of a portfolio view and look across disease areas and tissue types and assets. And so, we have the luxury of thinking through what is the right sequence of events, what comes first, what comes second, what can de-risk, what moves can de-risk the next move. and so how do you build a portfolio in a structured, logical way that that addresses some of the risks along the way, but also allows for successes along the way to kind of fuel ongoing innovation. So, and as you mentioned, at the bio conference, we don't have all the answers by any means, and we're certainly not a not invented here firm. So we think of ourselves as a platform company in many ways, and we're always looking for partners to help kind of accelerate that platform. And we have a history of doing deals, and we're continuing to do more and more of them. We're in discussions, and many of them to kind of get at all the issues that are facing the gene therapy field. It's hard to put it that way. I mean, we talk about it as, a lot of the first assets, and like Luxturna and so on, were in many ways proof of concept assets. So you pick a disease area where the disease biology is completely understood or well understood. And from a technical point of view, that if you get expression, that what you need to do is you see an expression of a protein, and that's going to have an impact on disease outcomes and so on. So what I wouldn't say from the beginning we had the full portfolio view. I think from the beginning we worked on getting, solving the proof of concept, getting it over the hurdle. We are now at the stage of then thinking about, okay, well, how do we then think about this going forward? And as I mentioned, what's the right sequence of investments over time? And when you look at disease areas, we tend to think of them across, kind of two dimensions. Which of these are sort of amenable? Well, actually, three in many ways. First of all, where does gene therapy have a comparative advantage? Where is it the better solution for that disease, given the nature of the biology and everything else? That a gene therapy answer would be a good answer compared to small molecule, large molecule infusion, mRNA, RNAs, and all the rest of them. So that we start with that, and then say, okay, what has been technically feasible from a gene therapy perspective, and what will be increasingly be feasible going forward, because the platform continues to evolve and continues to get better and better. And so things that, sort of, payloads or vectors or immunogenicity challenges we're advancing on all those fronts. So, as that advances, you can take on bigger and bigger challenges from technical challenges. So if you can, control expression, for example. Well, once you control expression, you can start taking on other diseases with controlled expression. So that's one of the first things we think about is where are we today in that tissue type? Because you can't answer this generally. You have to think about a tissue type. Where are we today, and where are the investments we're making, unlocking that the platform in those tissue types? And that if we prove it again in one asset or another, that unlocks other assets. So we think about it from that technical lens. And then the other dimension we bring to bear is, the disease biology. What's the status of the disease biology and the disease biology understanding? Because there are diseases where we think technically we can get protein expression, let's say, in a particular that may affect a pathway and related to that disease. But the disease biology is at a stage where it's not quite clear exactly how that would translate into outcomes. And so you may say, let's wait a moment. We think we have an answer. We could technically get there the answer, but let's let the disease biology advance further in the meantime, or partner, frankly, with another firm who's more of a disease biology expert, and we're more of a platform expert. And we bring those two to bear to solve the problem. We are building, a gene therapy innovation center in Philadelphia on land that, acquired. That's almost acquired because it's a 99-year lease type thing, but from Drexel, and that is to build a center that has manufacturing and some research and frankly corporate space in one location. I mean, gene therapy is one of those fields where because the modality is emerging, the manufacturing piece of it has been a critical strategic component. It's not just something you do. Like traditional pharma, you build the plant at the last possible moment. because, it's another small molecule plant, or it's another, the modality is well enough understood. We're still working through, like we and all of the field are still working through a lot of the challenges of manufacturing gene therapies. And so having that, it is a strategic investment in a way, to be able to control that part of the equation. The other aspect of it is that given the stage of the modality, we're a very strong believer in that, research should sit next to manufacturing, should sit next to clinical, technical tech dev with the transfers, and frankly, even marketing and all the strategy and other functions. That there is a real value in co-location, because it's just one of these informal dialogues. You walk across the hall and somebody has a problem, you go back and forth. Once the modality is mature, then you have things like small molecule plants in Puerto Rico for tax advantages, because it's well understood modality. You build a plant wherever it makes the most sense. We're not at that stage of therapy today. It's hugely important. We're proud in the fact that we are actually the largest gene therapy company in the Philadelphia hub, but in many ways we help big apps. We help create the hub. It's very important for us in terms of the talent pools and the relationships with academic institutions and other firms. Is that being in a cluster like that environment, you pull on, there's talent pool around you, a general talent pool, but also very specific talents that you sometimes need, because the larger the cluster, the more specialized it becomes, and so a lot of these specialized functions that you need going forward are there and available once you hit that kind of critical mass, if you will. So it's important to us, and it's important to our identity as well as a Philadelphia firm. Yeah, everything you said is true. I think the Roche, this is a sort of validation of the technology. It's a validation of the management team. It's a validation of the Philadelphia cluster we just spoke about, and that Roche is invested in that location in a serious way as well. And then the company has obviously facilities around the world, but a lot of the center of the gravity is in Basel and in San Francisco, South San Francisco. So Philadelphia is actually then becomes an important part of the mix, and Roche made that decision in part because of the reason we just discussed, that it's a source of innovation as a cluster. Now Roche helps us in many different ways, but obviously one of it is that we can focus our efforts on advancing the science and don't have to go through the cycle of raising capital and so on and so forth anymore. So we, I'm the CFO as well as the chief business, in my range of responsibility. But I don't do capital market stuff because that's not what we need to do. We focus just on advancing the business. So that's obviously a huge, benefit, and also frankly a mental bandwidth thing that we can focus on the science there. Number two, Roche also, Roche has a wealth of expertise in a number of the disease areas that we're interested in. And as I mentioned earlier, when we think about ourselves as more of a platform company, Roche, I think, in large part thinks of itself as a disease area company, or has expertise in a particular disease biology area. And if you marry those two, good things can come, if you will. So we can, and it's not just I'd say disease area is not just understanding the clinical aspects of the disease and so on, but it's a lot of the biological pathways and the deep understanding of those that, coming together with the platform expertise can lead to great things. And we're just the beginning of that journey. Yeah, I guess the one comment I'd make is that, I've done a lot of portfolio work over my career. When I was at Bain working for large pharma, I was working on portfolio analyses and so on. I wouldn't want to say that there is there's an algorithm to it, but there is a bit of, a structured way of thinking through that and what opportunities and someone. What I think is different here is that it's all about what could be. So it's aspects of what sparks a research or what innovation ideas come to bear. So it's as much about creating a fertile environment for those things that you don't know about yet that you will uncover. Or in many ways, I think in a field like this, there are setbacks, and there are constantly setbacks and frustrations. And early on, it's analogous to the early days of monoclonals when they had a lot of the issues around that. So the perseverance and the creativeness around, hey, there's a roadblock here. How do I get around it? Oh, there's another way to do this. Or let's think about this. Well, let me talk to someone so there, and they have another idea, and we can do that. Is very much what it's a part of. So when I think about a portfolio here, it's not like you just put together a spreadsheet with pluses and plus minuses and so on and so forth. You have to leave room for the creative aspect of it. So the portfolio thing is about creating an environment. And I spoke about this earlier in the sense of like making choices that de-risk subsequent choices, but making choices that also give insights that help you address subsequent choices is part of it. So it is a bit more. We put a big emphasis on creating what we call a winning culture, and like an environment that enables and facilitates innovation and respect for colleagues and things like that. So culture is actually, as important as which choices you make in the portfolio. Yeah, this is why I was saying earlier that you have to think about gene therapy by tissue type. Like there's a common view, but in some of the early days, it was very much liver directed. For example, a lot of the gene, AAV naturally goes there, and so tissue tropism is a big issue. Like if I want to have a differential sort of delivery towards another tissue type, I'm still going to probably overwhelm the liver. Even if I turn those up, I try to get into the muscle, that means overdosing the liver because the bias is still towards the liver in many ways. So, delivery is, as you said, is the beginning point, and we tend to think of it in three big buckets. Like, what's the delivery vehicle? Then, as you said, it's like, what are the sort of side effects, immunogenicities that you have to manage as you're doing that, and then of course, what's the payload that is inside the AAV vector or whatever non-viral or what other means you do it. And when I take the point about delivery where you started, though, delivery is not a problem in the liver. But when you get to the CNS or ocular, we end up doing much more of kind of targeted delivery with devices type approaches. Maybe in the future we will be able to have systemic delivery that will move towards those tissue types, but we're not there yet. So delivery becomes essentially more by mechanical means than biological means in those tissue types. Now that brings us on its own host of problems when you think about devices and pharma companies in the world of devices and what's the right device and all the rest of it. And frankly, the intrusiveness of those tends to be higher. And Luxturna is a medical procedure in a hospital. So we think about delivery all the time as the beginning point, and you use whatever solution works best for that particular problem today. But you also, like in all these areas, you have an eye to the future. And what could it be, and how do I migrate in that direction?